as human beings, we don't shut stuff down. We just let it keep running, right? We go from meeting to meeting to meeting. Your brain never has a chance to shut down. So it gets slower and less productive, and it loses its kind of like cognitive strength.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Kristi. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. Today, I chatted with Christian Markow. He's someone who spent over 2 decades at the intersection of innovation, brand, and culture, and who's now laser focused on one of the most critical challenges in business today: how we design work to support the brain. He is a sought-after advisor to C-suite leaders, HR and facilities teams, and transformation officers, helping them reimagine the workplace to boost cognitive performance, team trust, and real productivity. With a unique blend of neuroscience, workplace design, and human behavior, he brings a deeply human lens to the way we think and work, all with the intention to bring out the best in both. He's the founder of Joe Smith, a boutique brand consultancy, which was acquired by strategic communications firm Padilla in 2015, and a former leader at a global growth consultancy, Profit. His client list spans from industries and includes brands like Target, GE, Polaris, Winnebago, and Disney. And today, his work is driving a new vision for happier, healthier, more high-performing brains at work. I can't wait for you to hear all about it. All right, Christian, well, thanks for being here today in your super cool space. I actually wish I was there doing this live and in person, so maybe I'll save that for round 2. But I just appreciate you being here. I'm really excited for what you have to share. I think it's a different perspective than what we've heard from other guests before. And so thanks for your time and being willing to share and open up about all the wisdom that you've built and created.
Happy to be here. Never thought about it as wisdom, but happy to share it.
Awesome. Well, as I do, I just wanted to start off with, you defining what a vibe means to you. I think that helps me and anybody listening kind of ground the conversation of what that means to you. So if you would share, that'd be awesome.
I don't know if this is too technical. It's probably not, but I think about it as behaviors, postures, and environment. I think that when people talk about vibe, and especially in a workplace, they talk about the people, the culture a lot, but they don't always talk about two other, we call a subset of behavior, which is posture. That has a lot to do with everything from psychological safety to feeling, openness or collegial. And the way people hold themselves is just as important as the way you behave, the things that you do. And then I think in terms of environment or your surroundings, it sounds like, yeah, no doubt, Christian. But I think a lot of people don't take it as maybe seriously as maybe they should. It probably has more significance in the vibe of how you work and how you feel as an individual than most people give it credit for.
100%. I mean, I can just relate to that personally when I worked for a company for a really long time, and they were a very, very old company, and they had amazing roots, and their physical space was very old. And there was a feeling when you walked in, the lights were dim, the cubicle walls were hot, the ceiling tiles were stained, and there was definitely a vibe. And then they went through a pretty significant transformation. And yeah, there was like a different feeling from most in the new space. And it was pretty incredible of like just how it created different energy.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's a lot. It's no different than like, the clothes you wear. on your body has a lot to do with, impacting how you feel in any particular given situation, like your confidence levels, your comfort levels, your sense of like independence or creativity is all kind of driven by that. You could have an amazing culture and you guys will make it right in that office that's got the dim lights and the okay coffee, and all that kind of stuff, but your superpowers are being limited and you don't even know it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love this concept that you brought up of posture, right? So you're not talking about like holding your shoulders back like you think when, maybe your mom or my mom did, right? Like don't shrug your shoulders, hold your shoulders back. That may be a component of it, but like can we dig in there for a minute because that's not something that I think I've really thought through or had a conversation with somebody about how that can impact the vibe. So tell me a little bit more about what you mean.
So I'm from Virginia, the South. We do a lot of hugging in our neck of the woods. And some people don't like that, and that's okay too. But that's an example of how I think about posture. We had a workshop. I'll use a quick example, quick aside. Sorry. And it was a team of about 15 people. And we have a space here at Lost Office called the Flat. And inside the Flat, we have a conversation pit. And it's essentially a big, what you would think, it's a big circular kind of comfortable seating area. It's low to the ground, very relaxed. When most people come into that space, they'll either instantly be like, oh, this is amazing, right? It just kind of makes them relax. And other people will kind of sit on the end of the sofa for a little bit. And then over a series of like 5 to 10 minutes, they slowly start to loosen up. And that space, it's essentially like 3,000 plus year old technology. It's been around forever. And the idea is that it puts everyone on a level playing field, right? You're all kind of seated in the same kind of area and you're looking at each other. So that physicality of that conversation completely changes the team dynamics versus sitting around a conference table where everyone is kind of like separated by, this block of wood or melamine or whatever it is in the middle of the day. The team that we had in, and we did this on purpose, a little experiment. We had 2 kind of armchairs in the space as well. We usually put them in there in case someone just isn't, physically able to kind of like sit on the sofa, that kind of thing. The CEO immediately sat in the chair and the rest of the team was sitting in the round, in the circle, which indicated kind of like a power statement. So that is a posture move, right? He didn't even know it. He didn't even know he's doing it. Guy's great, right? But there are things that we do in terms of posture that create signals around you're in charge. I can only say so much, or this is going to be a confrontational conversation versus a mutual conversation. So posture is all about creating dynamics that make people feel like they can have a conversation, they can think hard together, they can have an argument, right? That's kind of how I think about it. And there are all different kinds of ways to create different postures and spaces.
Yeah. So using that example, was there like an observer of what was happening so that you could give feedback to them later? Did the CEO end up recognizing like the posture that he took and the position that he had? I mean, how did that go down and how did you kind of break that out?
Yeah. So if they're not asking, for the advice, you have to be careful because typically what happens is someone on the team who's, the point of contact is like, hey, could you give some advice to our leader about X, Y, or Z? So it usually involves hey, let's grab a coffee and talk about how you felt like the session went. And would you mind if I gave you a little bit of advice? The person that I'm talking about completely open to it, right? I think he wants a successful team, wants everyone to feel collegial. And I think for that person, kind of being kindly told, hey, here's some things that you did that I noticed just by nature of what I do for a living that you should pay attention to if you want X, which you've said to me before, you want your team to feel this way. Here's some things you can do to help create that vibe, so to speak. And so it was accepted actually like very well, right? It's like, oh my God, really? I didn't even think about that. I just normally like to sit in a chair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And maybe if that is the case, right? And you're the CEO, you can up front tell people like, hey, I don't want you to think I'm sitting in this chair from a position of authority or power, but I generally like to sit in a chair versus the couch. So like,
I've got a bad knee.
yeah, I want to take that out of the question just from the beginning.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. And my going in stance for anyone when we're working with them on, collaborative team dynamics is we're all human beings and we all want to improve as human beings, and we all appreciate kind of being told things that we can do to improve in the right way. Right. So the trick is to just make sure that you're not creating an accusatory or a what I would call like a definitive stance, like this is who you are, but more of a suggestive stance. Like, hey, did you think about?
Okay, so we're going to talk about Lost Office, and I want to spend, you're doing some incredible, cool things there that are really backed by intention and research and all these great things. But before we get there, I want to understand a little bit of your journey of like what got you there, right? Like these defining moments in your life that made you realize and recognize that this was so important to you, and you, in fact, wanted to go impact other organizations. So maybe you can, I don't need, an outline of your resume, but just like these experiential things that you encountered in your life that have got you to build this incredible space.
I was going to go back to the fifth grade, but I won't.
You can do whatever you want.
Back in town school. Now, I would say probably there's two maybe important things to note that led us to where we are with Lost Office. The first is that I have grown up kind of as a creative professional, innovation work, and concepting work primarily, brand development, those kinds of things, and culture transformation around it. But I would say that one of the things that I always experienced, and all of the work that we've done, and done everything from building big, huge, resort casinos in Vegas to creating new drinks and new customer experiences for restaurants and that kind of stuff, is the time and space that we needed from teams to have the right kind of conversation was always incredibly difficult. And you could always tell the companies that were kind of being ruled by process and by like the way, because the answer on, well, where are we going to have like our, session to go through all of the stuff 1, 2, 3 days. So like, oh, well, we only have a half day's worth of time, or I think we can do it in our conference room over in, building C or something. And that is one of the big challenges that we saw that kind of drove us to think there's got to be a better way, right? There's a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport that talks about this concept of the grand gesture. And he uses several different examples around people who would depart from the normal world. They'd invest their time, their money to go somewhere else. And what that does is it creates a neurological kind of like flip on a switch for your brain that says, I'm investing my time and energy here, right? And then all of a sudden, you have to kind of maintain that space, but you are now in a place where the distractions, the interruptions, the place where you're going to go to think is different. So we always tried to create that space, and the constraints were really driven by what we had available to us. A museum, side room, a hotel space. We tried to I've done things in the middle of the San Diego Zoo before, or in the middle of a graveyard. So we've done that kind of stuff.
I love that.
We still do that kind of stuff. But no space that we have ever worked in the past, I'm embarrassed to say it, but almost 30 years now, has ever been really designed for a team. And when I say that, I mean everything from the furnishings to the scent and the air to the type of food and nutrients and water you put into your body, the technology, the tools, the music in the background, all of that stuff being designed to wrap itself around a team and put them in the right brain state for whatever they're trying to achieve, right? Whether it's a really tough conversation, whether it is generating a lot of creative ideas, whether it is building a strategic plan or a team coming in to like get over some really like deep code challenges. You need different influences to help you get into that right frame of mind. So that's part one of the story. Part two of the story is that I grew up with ADHD and didn't really know it, and probably kind of did, but it didn't really impact me until about 4 years ago when I can't ever remember. I'm either 53 or 54. I'm one of those two things.
That's just a number, right?
Just a number. But it was a moment that I remember, like I can see it right now. Driving down the street, getting ready to go to a meeting, turned down the road and realized it was a one-way street and almost hit a car head on. At 53 or 4, right? Why is that happening to me? So that was worrisome. I'm like, maybe I need to go do something about this. And then the next week, I did almost the exact same thing, except it wasn't a car, it was a human being. And thank goodness I did not hit them, but same thing. So what happened as a consequence of that was two things. I went and got my testing and definitely have pretty severe ADHD and got medicated for it. But the other piece of it was that I went down this rabbit hole around kind of neuroscience. Like, how does your brain work? What's creating this for me? And it opened up this world of like volumes of available science to all of us that people probably inherently would say that makes sense. Or maybe they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. There's so much science out there on sensory impact, nutrients, environment, social interaction that impact the way your brain works, how your neurotransmitters, which are basically like all your different apps. If your brain was, it is the computer, but if you were to think about a computer or a laptop, all the different apps that are working, right? How those kind of do their work, your processing speed, like how fast or slow your brain waves are moving to allow you to either really think broadly and openly about creative ideas or really focus in and get things done at a more analytical, kind of faster pace. And then your cognitive load, which is like the RAM in your brain, how much RAM you have to run all those apps. At what point does it get, filled up and you got to start shutting stuff down? As human beings, we don't shut stuff down. We just let it keep running, right? We go from meeting to meeting to meeting. We've got, to go from meeting to like pick up the kids to now go get the groceries to do whatever it is. And in the meantime, when I do have a break, I'm not going to shut everything down. I'm just going to like, do some dread scrolling, or I'm going to listen to a radio show and a podcast because that's my downtime. Your brain never has a chance to shut down. So it gets slower and slower and less productive, and it loses its kind of like cognitive strength. So learning about all of that, I was like, man, this isn't just an ADHD issue. It's a modern kind of like worker issue, and it's a global issue. So we started thinking about how we could create an environment that impacted all of those things. Essentially, how could we basically pull levers around all of the sensory sciences, the social sciences, and everything else to create an environment that helped, our brains work better? And that came from basically me realizing that my brain wasn't working the way it needed to.
That's fascinating. And I think the thing that made me actually reach out to you on LinkedIn, and I'm going to kind of go back for a minute, is this thing about sense, right? So it was fascinating to me what you were saying about sense. And when you and I first connected, you were talking about certain plants or certain scents and what they trigger in your brain. So I'd love for you to go down that rabbit hole, because that was fascinating. And since then, I've been very intentional about like lighting the right candle in my office while I'm working, because like there's warmth about a flame to me, and there's something about a certain scent that evokes a feeling. So I'd love to hear from you, like what that is and how that works and all those things, because it's fascinating.
Well, just a real quick note on the candle and the flame is that is a lower temperature of light, right? So when you think about broad daylight, it's a very high temperature. It's up in the 5,000s. And that flame is down probably in the 2,500 or less. Like when you go to the store, you're at Home Depot and you're like, oh, which light do I want? And it's either warmer or brighter, right? And everyone hates the daylight ones, but they get them anyway. Um, the the idea on the candle is that is a very kind of like warm, comforting like light that is emitting that just kind of like it calms you down, right? It actually is lowering your cortisol levels to a degree, right? The scent thing is very similar. The quick science on your brain in terms of sensory inputs is that when you think about your five senses and how your brain kind of like works with them or kind of like interprets them, most of your senses go through the thalamus, which is like your transition. It's like your relay station. Scent is the only one that bypasses it. It goes right to your hippocampus and your amygdala, which are your emotion centers and your memory centers. And what's fascinating about scent and kind of the part one of the rabbit hole is there's a great study, and we actually have built a scent archive off of this notion, is that when you kind of like just inhale a scent that's pleasing to you, right? It doesn't have to be like lavender or anything in particular. It's just a scent that you find appealing. It actually goes right to those two parts of your brain, and it starts to trigger what I would call kind of like that. It's ironic, but it's in the box thinking. It's like triggering stuff that's in your brain that's been there forever that you just forgot about. And at the same time, it's opening up your kind of like your acceptance of other people's ideas, because it's essentially like relaxing you a little bit, right? So now you're more open to other people's thoughts. That science, which is an NIH study, is what led us to create a scent archive in the space. So we have, imagine like an old school apothecary wall. It's all these little bell jars, but you essentially just pull the bell jar up. We have basically essential, like pure essential natural oils from all over the world. They're in there, and you just smell the bell jar because it all kind of builds up into the cap basically. And it just does that. Like we've had teams come back out and keep recharging, right? But the other piece of it is like people will have a smell and they'll be like, oh my God, that reminds me of like my grandmother's kitchen from when I was 6 years old. And all of a sudden, this whole idea about, something they're trying to solve comes to light, right? Either because the way it made them feel or because it triggered a new idea regarding the food they were remembering, whatever it is. The other kind of more scientific piece of the story is, and you're talking about a particular scent, it's actually Hinoki cypress.
Yes, so that's what it was.
Yeah, there's a study that was done in Japan, and they took a group of business people and they basically sequestered them into a hotel for a week. And they went about their regular work days, but at night they would go to the hotel and the room was infused with Hinoki cypress. It's just atomized Hinoki cypress essential oil. And what they found at the end of the study is that their cortisol levels dropped, which is directly related to your stress levels, right? Your higher cortisol creates more stress in your body, which ultimately impacts everything from your heart health to your overall kind of like, body tension, all that kind of stuff. So the reason why Hinoki, I would say the reason, but the theory behind Hinoki cypress is that it is a molecule that the plant or the tree emits that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, right? And that molecule helps prevent kind of like bacteria from infesting the tree. It helps like prevent bugs from getting into the tree. So it's a defense mechanism, a protective mechanism for the plant. Well, 200,000 years ago, like our DNA was pretty much the same as it is right now. The only difference is that we're a little bit more able to drink like cow's milk, right? But think about that. Like in 200,000 years, our DNA really hasn't changed much, right? And yet back then we were finding refuge and comfort in home inside a forest because like the trees, it was protective to us. So that scent is part of our DNA in a way, right? So now we're in an environment where we're in these buildings that are, human made, right? They're not really infused with the levels of nature that our body is actually like craving. So that little charge of Hinoki cypress will actually be, like welcomed by your body and impact you in a very physiological way.
I wonder if our bodies like crave that to reduce, because you read all these studies, right? Like that how cortisol levels are at an all-time high, or like, people trying to lower their cortisol levels by doing X, Y, and Z, when really it could probably be something as simple as just like having this scent archive, or burning a candle with this smell, or going for a walk outside, putting more plants in their house, right? Like I actually physically notice when I go into somebody's home and there's not a single plant in it, or a single live plant in it. My house is like a jungle.
Oh yeah.
Like I love it, and I'm super proud of like the plants I've been able to keep alive and grow inside my house. I always think, because one of my core values to me and for my business is like keeping it super simple. And it's like we have forgotten these things that are so core to our being, that are really simple and all around us. I mean, if anybody's listening, go to Home Depot today and buy a plant that sits on your desk. I don't care which plant it is, as long as it's green and it can be indoors. It's step one, right? You can get to the more elaborate plants and care and what they do and how they do it. But just do that, like bringing life inside to where you're at. It's so, so, so very important. I agree. Do they make, so these Hinoki cypress trees, are these trees that can grow indoors? Are these very exquisite trees that only live in certain climates? Like, do you know?
I mean, it's a cypress, and it's there's, I couldn't list them all off, but not every what I call a conifer tree and evergreen. But there are a good portion of evergreens that do have that kind of like molecule in them. So, yeah, I mean, there are certain plants like cypress that you can have inside a building. I mean, a lot of them you can. It just depends on lighting and those kinds of things. I mean, we have well over probably 200 plants in this building in our space right now. And so like each one, we're like, oh, that one doesn't like that area. So they're kind of like little people, you got to know,
Sure.
you just got to know what they like.
Yeah, yeah. I want to talk about those plants for a minute, but I have a fiddly fig tree that I bought at Home Depot years ago. We went through a remodel. This fig tree like survived our living inside the remodel of our house and everything. And it is the most incredible, beautiful plant. We now have to have like string tied to certain branches that hangs from the ceiling because these branches have gotten so big. But it's like we water it. It has like a ton of natural light, and it like brings such life into our house. I know that sounds so weird for a tree, but it does. It's like, and it's just growing incredible. I'm very proud.
But you should be. I think that's amazing. Like, I love that. Like, but that just proves the point, right? That is what we as human beings, that's what we need. So it should feel natural to you have that. I mean, plenty of studies around the impact of it. When, you say a plant, but like you think about clusters of plants, right? There's plenty of studies on the impact of plants and visibility to the outdoors in hospitals, right? That actually speed up healing versus patients who are in rooms that have no windows or no plant life in them. And so it is a very real thing, right? You talked about like the simple stuff. My kind of going stance right now is that the working world is spending so much time trying to figure out, and not that these things are bad, they're all good and important, how to improve a process, right? What's the best technology? How do we create new rhythms for X, Y, or Z? And there is so much low hanging fruit around plants in the building. Something as simple as hydration programs. You think about like your body, most people will forget to drink enough fluid in the day, or they will drink too much caffeine, which is a diuretic, which actually removes hydration, removes liquids from your body. And you think about your blood as the fluid that keeps your brain moving, right? the less fluid that is, the slower your brain moves. So when you're not hydrated, your brain's not going to function as well as it could. So productivity, like we're trying to improve productivity by getting better technology, better software, better processes. Just put some water in your people, for God's sake, right? Start there.
It is true. It is true. Like we've forgotten the simple things in life. We have forgotten them. Even when I have conversations with leaders day in and day out, I'm like, can we pause for a minute? Like we're over here trying to solve for this, but like, let's go back to the beginning and the core of like what's driving this or what our intentions are. I had this conversation this morning. I said, I understand the conversation you're trying to have around this person taking time off and how they went about it and they don't have any time. I said, but can we just stop and assume the best intentions here? The best intentions. And then let's go back to like, what are they trying to accomplish and achieve by going on this vacation? Like, I don't think they're trying to be malicious. I don't think they're trying to get away with something. Like, let's just assume that they're not. And like, let's play this out, assuming that they're just like, they planned this. They didn't think it was a big deal. And now they've gotten themselves in this predicament, or it's a bad time for the business or what have you, right? Like, let's bring it back to the simple things in life versus like overcomplicating every single conversation that we have.
Right. And more deeply rooted inside of that is like my thought is there's a certain level of individual siloism inside that team structure, perhaps, right? Because a team that feels like they're, fairly connected, have great chemistry, those things don't, they don't happen. You work those things out on the fly, and there's a level of honesty around them.
Right. Yeah.
There's synchrony, a team.
Totally. Let's go back to this plant thing for a minute, because I think last time we were talking, you walked me around a little bit to show me like the plants like hanging from the ceiling. And so there's like a strategy behind where you put them, how you put them, and the colors on the wall. And that all like has a physical element of it too, right? So I'd love to just like hear a little bit of insight around that, because I think that's really important too.
Is it appropriate to walk around, or will that like get too dizzy, or doesn't
it? No, absolutely, because this goes on YouTube too. I'd love for you to walk around.
We can do this real quick.
Okay.
So just to recap on Lost Office. So Lost Office is kind of like a space built on neuroscience, and we're in the library right now. You can't really see it perfectly, but these are all real plants that we've been training for a year. And the idea is that we're kind of in the middle of the canopy, right? Or the middle of the forest here, so to speak. In this space, like everywhere you look, right, there's going to be plant life, right? And everything from the colors, the lighting. A lot of our lighting is 3,500 degrees or less in terms of the temperatures. And here's the scent archive, by the way, since we're walking around, right? So you just kind of take this up and take a little waft. But this is an introspective space. We designed it to kind of be intrinsic, like to have people kind of go into their brains and kind of think through things. And in this space alone, we've probably got like, I want to say 30 plants. This is the conversation pit I was talking about, right? And there's the infamous chair, right?
Have you guys considered taking that chair away, or does it give you a read into a situation or create good conversation? Like, what's the intention behind having it there?
We often don't have it there. Sometimes if we know that a group has someone who might not be physically comfortable sitting in a posture that's low, we'll have it there for them just as a matter of comfort. So, and then I'll do it real quick. This is our kind of coffee bar area. And again, just, plants everywhere. The colors, we spent the greens and the kind of shades of greens that we have on the walls were all painstakingly chosen. I think I told you when we first met that the interior designer of our space is also my wife. And she had to
cool. My gosh, I'd love to see the interior of your house. It's so
A lot
cool.
like yours, a lot of plants, a lot of plants. And then this is the bigger room, right? So we
The
house
hang
rear.
plants. I love that.
Yeah, we can house like really big workshops in here, and then we've got the pegboard in the back. But just the colors are intended to essentially be a mix of calm but also energy. So a lot of natural colors, all of the shades of green. They feel moody, but they also feel organic. And that's a lot of the idea here is how do we actually create, a feeling that can achieve both the levels of energy we need and also create a sense of calm. I mean, even the the stone that we chose is, it has flow to it and motion, right? Kind of blends under the wall. So it's, we tried when we did this, we didn't want to create a space that felt trendy. We didn't want to create a space that picked up on the latest types of furnishings. A lot of the lighting that we picked, Lisa picked by hand from people who built them by hand from the Ukraine, from Malaysia, from Poland, and all with the intention of creating a sense of kind of like, I'm not really sure where I am. It feels kind of global and so
What is like maybe the most significant impact or thing you're most proud of like that you've done at Lost Office or with a team or most significant transformation? And maybe it's not even like, gonna make the press, right? But it's something that's just like impactful to the human that they are going to take forever and ever with them.
the one that immediately comes to mind that is a little bit more of what I would call like a expedition, but it still uses a lot of the same kind of like sensory and social sciences that we employ in the space. And when this happened a little bit longer ago, so if I'm cheating a little bit here, but we did a project with Disney, and I was running a workshop with Disney. It was like they were bringing in kind of like their top creatives from the different parks and different places because they wanted to kind of say, hey, what is something that we could only do as Disney? And they were trying to rethink kind of like a kids get a ticket to the park for volunteering. Right? And they're like, well, that's nice, but what can we do that only Disney could do? So we constructed an experience, right? These are really creative people, right? So they could come up with all kinds of ideas, but what we wanted to do was impact them in a very different way so that they could feel what it meant to give of yourself to someone else. And so, and I'll try and go through this quickly. We essentially took them to 3 different spots. And the first spot was Dylan's Candy Bar, which is if you've ever been to a Dylan's, big candy retail outlet, all the candies in the world, right? We gave them boxes and we gave them $50, and there's like 15 of them. And these are like, these are people that are, they've been in their businesses for like 30 years or so, right? We said, create a gift for yourself. This is your reward. You guys are working hard. So we're just going to start by letting you make your own gift box. And they went crazy, right? They're making stuff for themselves, for their kids, filling it all up, all that kind of stuff. Cool. Put them on the bus. And then we take all their boxes, put them in the back of the bus. Next stop, a Catholic church. And we have the pastor basically walk them through all of the rituals of a Catholic church, right? And explain, what the holy water is and why the altar set up the way it is. And they're starting to understand like what all these things mean that maybe, 60, 70% of them had no idea. While they're there, we introduce a person who runs a homeless shelter for women and children, single women and children. And she explains what their mission is. And we go there. And instead of touring the facility, we bring them into a gym. And in the gym is a huge sheet of craft paper rolled out. Like think about a 3-4 foot wide piece of paper rolled out with markers all over the place. And we tell them that they're going to spend some time with the kids. and they're going to draw pictures of what makes the world a great place. And we made sure that the kids like knew what their job was and they were comfortable with it and all that kind of stuff. And we actually had the kids choose the person that they wanted to draw with. And it was an absolutely brilliant experience, of which, a year later, I had heard that some of the people were still in contact with some of the kids they were drawing pictures with.
Wow.
But while they were drawing those pictures, we went and got the candy boxes that they had made for themselves and had them give them to the kids. And by the end of that whole experience, we had people kind of in tears and thinking about like the reality of what they were doing as volunteers and what they should be doing as volunteers. And the crazy thing is they came up with some brilliant ideas for really inspiring kids to, to want to go out there and give of themselves more. But that is the one, I think, workshop experience where by the time we got to the end of it, I could physically see in people's eyes that we had changed them somehow. And to me, that is the power of an experience. That's the power of surroundings, of environment, of engaging people in what I would call it's contrived, because we certainly contrived it. We constructed an experience, but a non-contrived social interaction. We just let it be what it needs to be because the human being is going to figure it out. Right. So I would say that is probably the one thing that has always stuck with me in the many things that I've done in the years, where I'm like, if we can impact people that way through an experience, then we should be able to do that every day. And everyone should be able to experience that. So when people walk through the doors at Lost Office, we want them to walk away feeling just a little bit like, man, I really needed that. Like I really felt like that was well worth my time.
100%, because the ripple effect of that, right? It's not just that single experience, but it's like the change inside them then goes far beyond that one day or that few hours or that one interaction. And I think that if we kind of circle the wagons and bring this back to leadership, is that is the power that leaders have, right? I don't know if we should even call it power. Maybe it's more like influence that leaders have on their teams, on their organizations, and I'm not even just saying people who have people reporting to them. There are people who are leading things that don't have direct reports and aren't formally a manager, leader, whatever by title, right? But like the influence and the impact that they have on other people can be quite profound, and in a good and in a bad way. So it's like a recognition of the fact that you can have that impact and to make those experiences good ones, right? So that they can walk away and say, man, that was incredible. That was a great conversation. I really connected with that person. I really got to know a little bit more about myself, because then they're going to go home. They're going to teach their kids. They're going to teach their neighbors. They're going to like have these conversations, and we're just missing that.
Yes,
like we're
yes.
so wrapped in like getting the next thing done that we just miss these things. It's just incredible. So I want to like, as we kind of wrap our conversation together, because I could keep talking down these different like plants and paint color. And I mean, I think in like another life, I should probably be an interior designer because it's so fascinating to me. But yeah, the impact we as just human beings have on others that we interact with throughout the day and the environments that we create for them is far beyond just that one interaction. So I think that's just, and that sounds like that's really what you're doing with Lost Office, right? Is just creating the space and experiences for people to be their best, do their best, and go make an impact in this world.
Yeah. And I would say, to anyone out there who is leading a team or influencing a team, don't take for granted the significance of your surroundings and the way that you construct an experience to have a conversation. We spend so much time preparing for an offsite or just like trying to get everyone on the same schedule to do that. And then you get there and that Cal Newport switch, right? Like your brain immediately says, I'm committing, I'm in a different place. and this environment starting to speak to me. And then as soon as the experience goes to a whole bunch of PowerPoint presentations and the typical stuff, it goes,
Orders. Yeah.
right? So you miss the
You
opportunity.
open up your laptop and you start working, or you start looking at your phone, or you start like just filling your brain with the things that were distracting you in the first place.
Yeah. So paying attention to not just that these things are actually important, because the time you take will actually speed up your productivity and your team chemistry in the long run. You've got to take the time to do them. And when you do them, don't just find a space and go. Make sure you're putting the energy into preparing it to be an experience that will be memorable, and create those conversations. You know, a beer and a wine in a hand and some bowling balls does not do the trick. I mean, it kind of does, but not the way you need it to.
And it's not for everybody, right? Like,
And it's not for everybody.
yeah, I think that's another thing to really, really keep in mind too, is like to find a place in a space that can meet the needs of most. Because you're right, like a beer and a wine and a bowling ball, it might meet a fraction, but it really might turn off the others, right? So if you can create that common space.
Yeah, and think about yourself. Like you have 3 kids, right? They're running all over the place. The last thing that you have time for is after work,
Yes.
right? Like that is not where you're interested in building chemistry with your teams. And so how do you, to your point, think about all the different people they're going to be a part of an experience, and be mindful of what they need. And it's not like, one trick pony for everyone wins the race.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So we've talked about so much. If there's one thing where people should start, right? I'm not suggesting that this is just going to be the end all be all, but if they could simply go do something next after listening to this, that will help them improve the vibe of themselves, their personal life, their professional life, their teams, their organizations, whatever it is. What's that next thing that you recommend that they go do?
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to say, hey, just buy 5 plants, right? And start to feel the difference.
Right.
But I think if I were to just keep the focus narrowed to surroundings, right? Let's not worry about all the social and behavioral stuff for now. Just create a checklist, right? A little simple checklist that essentially says, I'm going to go look at my work environment. Like if you're a hybrid organization, what are the work environments at home and at the office, and what's actually happening? And think about like time spent in the space, right? Are people just on Zoom calls or Teams calls in the office instead of actually spending time together? So the question on that one topically is, experientially, what are we doing that could be improved? The next one would be like, environmentally, what are we doing that could be improved? So yeah, like examine your space. How are the seats? Like for someone like ADHD, if I don't have a seat that's moving, I'm not going to be able to pay attention, right? Because I can't fidget. And then the last one I would say would be like, for lack of a better way to say it, nutritionally, like what could be improved, right? Is your office filled with a bunch of like sugary snacks and things that, are going to give people quick hits of energy, but then an hour later they crash big time? Like, are you overloading? And how do you have a conversation around like, what is a better way to keep us hydrated, to keep us filled with the right kind of protein driven nutrient? It sounds new agey and crazy, but my God, it works. It works.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't even crack the nut on the whole concept of like hybrid. We talked more about like what you can physically do in an office space that maybe you have more control over. But I mean, that would be an interesting part too, quite honestly, of like, how do you crack the nut of this new space that we're in? Now, a lot of people are doing return to office, which has its own challenges, right? But how do you ensure that you can kind of simulate an environment that you really have no control over to some degree? I don't know. That's for another episode, but
Completely.
I was love to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I just, it is wisdom, and It comes so naturally to you, which is probably why at the beginning you're like, is it wisdom? But it's just like who you are authentically. And so I appreciate you sharing that, and all the simple things yet that have become so complicated that people can do in order to just create the right physical space so that the impact to their kind of mental load can be opened up to create and do as they should. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate your.
Thank you. And my pleasure. It was a blast.
Christian was an incredible guest, and I loved how we got to talk through things that are deeper than what we typically can see or believe shape an experience. Whether it's a thoughtfully designed space, the subtle influence of scent, or the natural boost from a few well-placed plants, small changes really can make a big impact on how we feel when we work. Neuroscience also reminds us that our brains crave environments that are intentional, connected, and safe. And when we tap into experiential learning, we don't just shift mindsets, we shift team dynamics. And finally, leadership is influence. As a leader, how you show up, your posture, shapes the energy, the trust, and the success of your team. So thanks for listening, and here's to creating workspaces and relationships that spark connection, creativity, and real results. And with that, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep vibing, my friends. If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.